Hello and welcome to this edition of the Business of Story. I'm your host, Park Howell, and you are in for a big treat today because we are going to do two things. First, we'll walk you through how the current meditation brand story was created using the Story Cycle system. And then we'll discuss with Current Meditation's co-founder, Ross Weisman, what he learned personally in that brand narrative creation process that helped him grow as a storyteller, and how he applied his newfound skills to create the story behind his new company, Epic Managers. This episode will show you how you will grow personally as a more confident, clear, and persuasive communicator when you apply our proven story structures to grow your enterprise and, in the process, yourself. I'm so happy you're with us today. Let's get after it. This episode is coming to you the day after Christmas, so I'm going to tap into the magic of the season with something that might sound a little woo-woo to you. It's called designed serendipity, and it can feel a bit like magic. You know what I'm talking about because I'm sure you have experienced those serendipitous moments when things just kind of magically fit together, kind of click, even sort of point the way forward for you. I first heard of this idea of designed serendipity from one of the producers of the famous movie The Sting that starred Paul Newman and Robert Redford. His name was Tony Bill, and he was the commencement speaker when our son Parker graduated from the Dodge School of Film and Media Arts at Chapman University. Tony Bill told the attendees at that 2010 graduation to never underestimate the power of designed serendipity as they build their Hollywood careers. He said success is all about effort, of course, endless learning and practicing of your craft, and paying attention to the serendipitous moments because your opportunities will come from the most surprising people, places, and events. So you got to be paying attention and be ready to act on those serendipitous moments. I tell you this because business coach Joelle Prochera encouraged me to keep a synchronicity journal, jotting down when serendipitous moments occurred in my life. So I began the journal a couple of months ago and have been blown away by about how often the universe comes together in surprising ways to advance our lives forward. For instance, in September, Michelle and I were at the beautiful, very exclusive, swanky community of Forest Highlands in northern Arizona. It's just outside of Flagstaff. We were there for a fundraising dinner for Honor Health. Before the whole festivities began, of course, we showed up, grabbed a cocktail, and were looking out over the golf course through, off the club's porch there. And I looked over at her and I just mentioned, man, I'd love to play this exclusive course one day, but being private, you got to be invited. Not a minute later, we walk back into the gathering crowd and we run into Jeff Weisman, the father of today's guest, Ross Weisman. Now, the Weisman family had all participated in the creation of the current meditation story, but we hadn't seen one another in several years. I think it was even pre-pandemic last time I ran into them. Jeff said, "Hey, man, how's it going? And oh, by the way, have you ever played our golf course out here?" I said, "No, actually, I haven't." So within 2 weeks, he had invited me out, and we played around a golf in that most beautiful course. One of the most incredible courses I've ever played on. Was that a coincidence, or was it something else? After we finished our round, Jeff told me about what Ross was up to with the creation of his new company, Epic Managers. This is also serendipitous because I was in the throes of reading my book, Brand Bewitchery, on air as I produced the audiobook series right here on this podcast. And I wanted to include the current meditation story, but it wasn't in my book. So I reached out to Ross, who, like his father Jeff, I hadn't seen since pre-pandemic times, as I mentioned, and he brought me up to speed of what he was up to. So I invited him on the show for this particular interview. Then more serendipity. My good friend Paul Blavin, who now lives back in New York, who I also hadn't spoken for in several years, you know how time flies, Well, Paul calls me out of the blue to talk about a new venture he and his business partners are creating to help disadvantaged business leaders enter the market with their own franchise opportunity. In essence, think of it as business franchises for the disenfranchised. Well, having just learned what Ross was up to with Epic Managers, I immediately connected him with Paul, thinking that the success of their franchising concept may just hinge on the ability to attract, train, and retain top frontline managers. Is this just a coincidence that our three worlds would engage in this timely way? Or is it something more like what Tony Brill described to those film school graduates that summer day in 2010 that he called designed serendipity? In lots of ways, I now believe that when you craft the exact right brand narrative for your company, you are triggering designed serendipity that connects your offering with your ideal customer. Because your brand is really about the stories people tell about you when you're not in the room. So you want to make sure that they understand and appreciate your brand story, and they feel free to tell it during chance encounters with their friends, family, and colleagues. For the most valuable form of advertising there is, you know what that is, of course, it's free word-of-mouth marketing. So trigger those by designing serendipity into your brand storytelling to help scale your brand through word-of-mouth marketing. Now, this chance encounter I had with Jeff Weisman triggered me to follow up with his son, Ross. I guess you'd call that my intentional outreach design serendipity, because it probably wouldn't have happened if I hadn't run into Jeff. Did these two encounters stir up the universe, attracting Paul Blavin's call and me connecting him with Ross? Well, maybe, because as Albert Einstein says, coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. I love that. I tell you all this because you are now part of this synchronicity as a listener and therefore new participant in this particular story. Is it coming to you at the perfect time? Maybe you're considering reframing or amplifying your brand story. Maybe you want to develop your storytelling skills to be a more convincing and persuasive communicator in 2024. Maybe you're in need of training your people on the 3 proven business of story structures to help build their careers and grow your business. Maybe you've thought about becoming more mindful in the new year through meditation. Or maybe you just need an epic manager to make everything run more smoothly in your business, but you didn't know where to turn. Well, if any of that sounds like you, then coincidentally, this episode is for you.
That story for us, like I have several, sets of scar tissue from things like that, and just the embarrassment of like, I just wish we knew how to find better managers, and the frustration of not knowing how to do it at the time. You feel a little helpless. So I don't want other people to feel that way, Park. I think it's worth, helping people, especially in this world of franchise where you have enthusiastic new business owners and they just want to do it right, but they don't necessarily have all the tools.
Ross Weisman grew up in the franchise business with his dad, Jeff, and Uncle Bob Weisman, building a veritable empire with brands like Massage Envy and European Wax Center. Ross has run his own franchise business for over a decade in both the multi-unit franchisee and regional developer role for 2 great brands. The family came together to build a modern meditation studio called Current Meditation, which has led to building his recruiting agency called Epic Managers. As you'll hear, Ross believes that the best branding tells a clear story. He uses European Wax Center as an example. They had a good narrative within their branding and taglines. Quote, walk in, strut out, and, quote, revealing beautiful skin, end quote. That can be a top-line attractor for talent when they identify with the brand, but franchisors have co-employment to worry about, so they can only provide indirect help to franchisees with recruiting and people management. That's why Epic Managers has come to the rescue. For For the franchisees, Ross says that when it comes to recruiting, the most common story is young managers with high potential who are looking to grow. But despite their best efforts, sometimes they're put in tough roles with little guidance or compensation. The best operators invest in these individuals so they have the right conditions and tools to succeed. That is the story of our customers and why we exist, Ross says. They invest because they have the wisdom to know it has a huge impact on both the business and the manager. On today's episode, you'll learn how the current brand story came together and how you can use the story cycle system to craft your own clear and compelling brand story. You'll also learn about the immense power of the proper story to make your brand ever mindful within your customers and to start triggering that designed serendipity. And how the hero's journey inspired the name Epic Managers and how Ross places the managers they recruit and place at the center of their story. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Ross Weisman. Hey, Ross, welcome to the Business of Story. It's great to have you here, man.
It's great to be here. Good to talk to you, Park.
Gosh, when did we meet?
I think that was 2017 that we met.
2017.
Or maybe, you know what? I think my brain has skipped a beat already. It may have been as early as 2015 that
That's
we met.
kind of what I was thinking, because we helped you pull together your brand story for Current Meditation, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But you guys, I think, showed up in our offices maybe late 2015. And the reason why I'm bringing that up for our listeners is I've known Ross for a while. He was a customer for a long time, pre-COVID. And we had the distinct pleasure of working with him and his family, a very involved, engaging, and fun family to work with, to help them launch a meditation franchise here in Phoenix, Arizona. So Ross has been kind enough to come on to take us through that story and to talk about what he learned in that process around storytelling and how he's applying it today with his new company, Epic Managers. So it's just a delight to have you here, man.
Yeah, excited to talk through it.
So you grew up in the franchise world. Can you take our listeners back? And I think it all started back in Jersey, didn't it, on the East Coast?
It did. I mean, it really started with my father and uncle getting into franchise in the early 2000s. They had retired from another business and decided we got to do something. They got super bored, typical story. And they got into franchise. They got into one franchise that wasn't as much of a home run for them before they found Massage Envy. And that was super early on. That was like 2004. I was still in high school. I remember them opening that first location in New Jersey. It was one of the first in the Eastern Seaboard. Now there's, over 1,000 of those. And we had a really interesting time, growing that brand, growing with it. I mean, they opened a location, it was number 52, but it might have been the 30th one that was open at the time. A lot of unknowns back then. It was kind of still the Wild West as it related to this new breed of service franchises that have come out. We like to think Massage Envy was kind of the OG. And that experience, they were
the OG,
RDs.
the original gangster, right?
Exactly. Of this new breed, at least. I know there's been franchise for decades and decades, but I think they kind of set the tone for this new compartmentalization of services, massage only kind of thing. And think about all the other things that have popped up since then, chiropractic and waxing and you name it. They've got a franchise for it now. But the experience that they had early on, I think it was really interesting growing up and observing that as they were opening it, a lot of, trepidation, concern around, is this going to work? It worked. And they ended up growing their store count. They were the regional developers, so I got to join on early in my career to be part of that regional development team. And really, it was a decade of getting to do that, of ultimately opening my own stores. We got involved in European Wax Center a few years later, and both great brands.
Well, they went beyond just being a franchise owner, right? I mean, they ended up kind of managing or running the entire northeastern seaboard for Massage Envy, right? I mean, they helped a
They
lot
had a
of
lot of
people launch.
states.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of states. Between the two brands, they were the RDs in about, I think it was about 7, 8, or 9 states, something like that. Between both, it was, both the East Coast. Some of it was in the Midwest, Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia. Some of it was Arizona and Nevada for European wax. So a lot of varied territory, but about 250 locations in those regions that they and our family ended up selling and supporting, getting open, and a lot of support for those franchisees as well. We had our own multi-unit operations in those states ourselves. So a lot of action around both of the brands.
It's funny the impact our fathers and mothers' careers have on us as kids. My dad was a civil engineer, had a heavy construction company up in Seattle, Washington called Constructors Pamco, and they built big stuff, dams and rivers and bridges or tunnels and bridges and that kind of thing. And so I and my brothers became laborers and cat skinners and carpenter assists. We basically worked our way through college out on some of those crazy, hairy jobs, but I never once thought about going into the construction world. I couldn't get away from it fast enough. It was fun, made some good money, but I learned a lot in that process simply about hard work and being creative, of thinking your way out of problems, when they arise in that heavy construction area. In your world, you went to work for your dad, Jeff, when you were in high school. What was some of your first ahas and or big pains in the neck when you first started working in the franchise world?
Well, the true story is that at one point I tried to work the front desk at a Massage Envy, and I very quickly learned that I am not built for that kind of work. I am not social enough, and I don't have the right kind of demeanor to be at the front desk. I mean, I thought it was a great experience to do that, but I had a great respect for our team that was running the phones, checking people in and out, and the managers at that point. I mean, that was what first gave me the realization that, this work, it may not be rocket science, but it's tough. I mean, it requires persistence, consistency. You're trying to execute a process and create an experience for guests that is unique and follows through on the brand promise. And that requires doing a lot of little things well each and every time a guest comes in. And my experience on the phones was definitely a small tragedy for that business that day. I'm glad we survived it. It didn't last very long, but I certainly got an education from the whole experience.
Take us to that moment when you realized you weren't the front desk guy.
Well, I think it has something to do with, first I can't take a lot of inputs in at once. So having the phone ringing while somebody is standing in front of you, and then you see another guest walking in and you're the only person at the front, I have a tremendous respect for, and there you go. That's a good, I see you testing me now, Park. I have a tremendous respect for people that can handle all those different things at once. It really is a choreography. And in that moment, my brain just shuts down. I couldn't have the conversation. I basically was staring at that person with a blank look who was standing in front of me, just trying to get a massage that day. That's all they wanted. They didn't want to get, a full ocular pat down. But I basically shut down for a moment. And so I had to be rescued. Luckily, the manager was there. But yeah, it was a panic moment for me, Park. I appreciate you having me relive that now. It's very generous of you.
When did you guys move out to Arizona?
That was '06. My family moved out basically all together. And I started going to college out here at ASU at the Honors College. And the rest is history. We've been out here ever since then.
Well, gosh, I just remember how much fun it was to have you all in our conference room at Park & Co., my ad agency at the time. And you were all just delightful to work with and open. And we started rolling out, the story cycle system and the power of story in business and that sort of thing. And I don't know if we got some eye rolling maybe from your Uncle Bob, potentially. I'm not sure. He seems to be the one that may be, a little bit more the skeptic in the room, but he came along. And what was it that attracted you to this idea that you really needed to build a story around current meditation?
I think it was that we all intuitively understood the importance of what we were trying to build with current meditation. It was in our minds an approach to bringing mental fitness to people in a way that was way more accessible and characterizing it in that way. That clarity and using a term like mental fitness really only came after we had the benefit of working with you at Park & Co. at the time. And it was a process because it was something new. It was new to us to figure out how to put this together so all the parts and pieces made sense. And there's a lot of parts and pieces to it to make it work. And in a way, a business about mindfulness is a little bit of a contradiction. So there's a bit of a tightrope to walk there. I think the story is what made it real and made it understandable for people in a format that obviously was more digestible, that people could see themselves participating in this and incorporating it into their lives. And so there was an immediate difference we detected when we first met you, because we spoke to a lot of different marketing agencies at the time, and a lot of them were they were strategic, but it felt like a compilation of tactics versus having a framework to work through. And I think that really set things apart when we saw what you were doing at Park & Co.
For our listeners, would you quickly describe the concept of current meditation, what you were going for through the store offering?
Yes. So I mean, at a high level, what we wanted to create was Current being the number one provider of meditation experiences for mindfulness and well-being in the modern world. Emphasis on modern. It was a way to create, maybe for lack of a better word, secular approach to this practice of mindfulness, which often is pulled into the yoga studios and the more Eastern practices of meditation. And I think a lot of people in the US associate it with that still to this day. But mindfulness has had its moment. It started, back then around 2015, 16. I remember seeing those articles. You see Time magazine with the big mindfulness cover one of those years. And it's reached the consciousness of people everywhere. And certainly in a country where there's no shortage of distractions and no shortage of, shock value of the headlines and, the way businesses try to get your attention, it creates a need for being able to create in yourself the ability to tune those things out, control your reaction to those things, recognize that reaction and kind of be able to moderate it yourself. And so that was a lot of what we kind of intuitively knew we needed a space for that. And that's what we were trying to create, something very accessible for people that they felt like they could start down this road of mindfulness themselves.
And it was a membership. You would come in and you pay certain levels of different memberships, and you could come in and work with your mindfulness practitioners. You even had the aerial slings up there that you could come lay in and go through a whole mindfulness suspended 3 feet above the floor. And I remember right after you opened, I brought my family in, including my college-age son and high school-age son and our daughter and her significant other and my wife, Michelle, and we went in and floated. We surprised them. They didn't know it. We went in for that and then went to dinner, but it was so much fun. It was the first time I had experienced that, and I will never forget our son, Caden, who's going to hear this because he edits the show, completely conking out, just completely asleep.
Totally.
Hanging out there, snoring, and we all had a good laugh, and it was just so much fun. It was just a great, great time.
We loved creating a space that was a sensory experience, and that was a lot of what we were doing to introduce people to the practice, but also make it interesting for them. And those slings were great. It was kind of like a cocoon that you could lay in, and that pressure around your body creates a parasympathetic response that calms your nervous system. And that was a way to get people deeper into a meditation more quickly, even if they were beginners. So we loved that. We did consider, by the way, Park, having a professional toe wiggler working at the studio. So if anyone fell asleep, they could just walk around and wake you up.
Just to be safe, yeah. Well, and even the name Current Meditation came out of the brand story development. I've got in front of me the one sheet, and this is just great timing, Ross, because I just finished up, as you know, the brand Bewitchery series, where I literally read each chapter of my book on branding and using the story cycle system, starting with episode 420 and taking people through it. So this is a case study that people can relate to, having heard that series. But when we came in, we sat down with you and your family, walked through what the business model was, walked through philosophically what your vision was, what the experience was going to be. And I'm just going to read down through this very quickly. We landed on the brand position of Current is the #1 provider of meditation experiences for mindfulness and well-being in the modern world. And I think you did a good job just before this of explaining what you meant by the modern world, that this is not just some woo-woo thing or you need to be a yogi to really experience the benefits of mindfulness and meditation, but you can be that regular person off the street. In fact, you located your first store in the Arcadia neighborhood, an affluent neighborhood here in Arizona, so that people could just happen in. So that it was really important to get that for the modern world down, right?
Yep, that's right.
And then you've got the unique value proposition, which we arrived at. Current strengthens your mental fitness and well-being. And I remember when we came up with that idea of mental fitness, because we heard you talking about, the need for meditation and what does that really mean. And of course, we're surrounded by gyms and yoga studios and whatever, and everyone's going for that physical fitness. We thought, well, let's just add on to that next chapter of thinking of going from physical fitness to mental fitness. And you all really embraced that.
Certainly. Yeah, I think that was kind of, to us, a missing piece that you could see in certain locations, gyms, things like that. They were working to incorporate this, but there is so much to mental fitness and what creates resiliency and how you can calm your monkey mind, create inner peace for yourself, basically, and learning how to deal with thoughts and understanding that those thoughts are not you. You are not your thoughts. And if you can observe them, you have a measure of control over them. And you have that split second between some stimulus outside and how you react to it that you can control. And that creates a tremendous amount of freedom in your life, basically freedom from these things that kind of drag you around day to day, your anxieties, your concerns, living in the past, thinking about and worrying about the future. And that, to us, it was enough to warrant having a space specifically for mental fitness.
Yeah. What did Shakespeare say? Nothing is good nor bad, less thinking makes it so, or something like that. I think I butchered that, but yeah, it comes down to what you think about, you bring about, as my wife, Michelle, loves to say.
Yeah, I like that version.
So the brand promise, this is what will they get emotionally by experiencing current meditation. And you landed, we looked at a lot of different emotions, but we landed with you on this emotion of freedom, being free. And then you added to that the 3 masteries of freedom being awareness, transformation, and intent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. We talked about that a little bit. Some of it was, like we said, it was that freedom from kind of being dragged around by your own thoughts. And the masteries with that, the awareness of your own patterns of thinking and recognizing those things using mindfulness practice, whether that's to label your thoughts and just see that they are not you. And then we talked about, transformation being that internal transformation of doing the work, doing, the practice of mindfulness is work. It's just like a workout. And that is what is required to be able to go through this transformation of yourself, how you interpret the world around you. and it requires intent, at the outset, and having that clear intent in the beginning, just like any other goal that you're going to set out for yourself, is critical so that you know what you're aiming for and it guides your journey. And so a lot of this was about the journey and the experience that the people, the guests, the members coming into Current Meditation would have.
And thinking back on that time working with you and your family, what I remember most is as we were going through the story cycle system and the process, that it felt like these insights, these aha moments that you shared, because you all came up with the three masteries of awareness, transformation, and intent, were like just lying under the surface of your business mind, your logic and reason brain, and going through the story process kind of revealed them. Because I remember when you said the three masteries of awareness, transformation, intent at the time, it struck me like, wow, there it is. It just kind of bubbled to the surface, but it's beautiful story elements to talk about the current meditation story.
Yeah, I think the story cycle framework is a great tool to bring those things, to bring clarity to the process, because there's always a lot of thoughts swimming around and you're trying to figure out where they fit into the picture. How is this a part of the story, and how does it enhance somebody's understanding of what value they're going to get from this? Mm-hmm. And by fitting it into these parts and pieces of the story, I think it frames it up very nicely. It's much more easily digestible. And it's tough when you have a whole bunch of tidbits of ideas that are important, but you just don't know where to put them. And that, to me, was a lot of the value of having this structure.
Yeah. And you have to be open to it, don't you? I mean, I have taken other people through it that weren't nearly as successful with it as you were, primarily because they kept pushing back. They would let their logic reason brain get in the way, when what I'm trying to do is connect that logic reason brain with the emotional side of the offering, because people buy outcomes, they don't buy the offering. You built out a beautiful store and had a great experience, but what they really wanted is when they left there, are they calmer? Do they have more control over that monkey brain, as you said? And that's what helps. That leads to the brand gift. So the brand promise is this emotional freedom that you get when you do the work. And the brand gift is, how does it manifest itself? And I love that one word of just being. That's the brand gift. When you're here, you're being in the moment, you're being yourself. You are a human being. And I just love that about your story.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the simplicity of that as well. And I think that's kind of the essence of all of this and of mindfulness, is to be comfortable in that state of just being.
Yeah. Then we move on to the brand personality. It's always the fun part, because as you know, with the 10-step story cycle, the first 5 steps are really not that much about you, the brand. It's all about your audience and what are they going to experience on their journey with you. You play the more important role of mentor or guide. So in this case, we asked you to identify your brand personality using the 12 archetypes, made famous by Carl Jung. And do you remember what was the one, your primary archetype?
We chose explorer. And I think we really enjoyed the idea of, we were setting out to do something new in this space and create a new experience. And so that was an exploration in itself. But then the experience that the guests would have was an exploration of their own inner mind, and the thoughts that they were having, recognizing those thoughts as not being themselves, but something that is being created in their own brain and that they have mastery over. And so that to us I think that was part of the frontier of mental fitness, that we really appreciated the archetype of the explorer.
And I love that too, because it does play on both the logic, reason, business model side. You are exploring this. You are a pioneer in making mindfulness modern, accessible to people, but then also internally, exploring internally. And you have 2 secondary archetypes that help really inform the content and the feeling for that. And they were the sage and the magician. Sage, I think, is pretty obvious. You're there, You're guiding them through and whatever. But let's talk about the magician. Why the magician?
I think the magician for us really related so well to the surprise of the experience. The way that our space was laid out was very intentionally done. We worked with a firm called Fitch, and
They're amazing. They're really
two
amazing.
gents named Jay and Keith who love those guys. They helped us create a space that was essentially very transitional. You can imagine a space that's in an inline mall, not typically where you would think I'm going to go get into a deep meditation, but when you'd walk into the lobby, there was kind of one phase of the space that was kind of luring you in. And then you'd get into the secondary area where you're taking your shoes off and you're putting your stuff in the locker, putting the cell phone away, shedding all of the weight of the world. And then there was a giant door that was soundproof, and you'd have to yank on that thing to get it open. You walk in, and it's a room with massive wooden beams running along the ceiling and lights along the back wall that create this crazy glow that could be a rainbow look, or it could look like it was a fireplace. And it just, the whole room felt like you were in an inner sanctum. Once that door closed, it sealed you in. There was, very little sound. And that was really kind of taking them through that journey just in a 20-foot space from the front door to that door into the meditation room. There was very much a reveal that happened when they go into that room. And I think that magician archetype for us was about creating the magic of that experience, because there was definitely the touch feel elements of it. There was scents with essential oils. There was the visuals of the lights. And then, of course, you're hearing the guide take you through a meditation, and they're potentially playing sound bowls, and you're feeling and hearing these vibrations. I think a lot of people, us included, really found that to be a magical experience. And so that's why we were so much gravitated to the magician archetype.
Well, and it comes back to the power of really understanding your story, because as that rolled out, I remember sitting in several meetings with you and Fitch, the architects, and we had an amazing creative director, the best I've ever worked with, Luis Medina. Now his company's Noble Candy, once I closed down Park & Co., and he was right there, right alongside you and your family in designing that experience with you, but then having that manifest itself in the advertising and the marketing and the look and the feel of the website. And it all played off of that story. We had the story like a scriptwriter, a director would in Hollywood go from that screenwriter's story and make sure that everything in that movie experience honors that story. And you guys did a really nice job of doing that with Current Meditation.
Yeah, well, not without your help and Luis's as well. I mean, that you're right. That was the hand in glove creation process, having both the space and the design happening alongside the creation of the brand and the marketing was, just, I think that was essential to making this whole story work.
It was so much fun. It was so great to see it come to life, too, on your dollar, not ours. So we were literally right across the street. That was the weird thing. Our agency was right across the street. We got to work with you guys and then see you all do that investment, and you spared no expense. It's an absolute beautiful facility. The last thing I want to go through real quick is I want to get over to what you learned in this process and how you are applying it in your new role, as managing partner of Epic Managers. But we also did in the Story Cycle system the 9 one-word descriptors that you use as themes for individual stories. And that's stories about your overall organization, that's stories about your offering, and of course, stories about the outcome. Let me just read through those 9 real quick. Accessible, friendly, genuine, caring, focused, wisdom, empowering, dedicated, and venturesome. Now, that's a lot, but it does give you those themes that then you go out and you develop your stories that point to those individual story themes. How'd those work for you?
I think that was what helped us get the right tone and the right images, the right all of the supporting pieces of creative that gave the feeling we wanted people to intuitively understand what the brand was about, what the experience was going to be for them, that it would be a transformative experience, going back to one of those masteries within the brand promise. And I think that's indispensable to have that. It's really the same kinds of things that people go for when they're saying, what's your brand voice or what's the tone? I think all of those things help you when you're, especially with copywriting and drafting content, to know that you're speaking with a voice that's consistent with the story you've created.
Yeah. And then finally, we land on your brand purpose, which I would call the moral of your story. After doing all of this work and then looking back through, where we landed on your different story elements, your brand purpose ended up being this: current exists to help all people connect with their authentic selves to lead more fulfilling lives. Bottom line. So that relates to everyone from the shareholders to the person answering the phone, who we know was not you, to everybody working there, to the ultimate impact you have on your customers and the communities you serve.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everything came together, and as evidenced by, we had some customers. I remember one woman individual named Carol, who I think basically lived at the studio. She may have gone to hundreds of meditations there. And I think it was just for us very fulfilling to see that these individuals were getting from this experience what we hoped, which was it was that important to them. It was that much a part of their lives that they wanted to work on this. They wanted to go through that journey and have that freedom from their monkey mind, but do the work and act like this is a mental gym. So it was very gratifying, and that was for us very fulfilling to see that, just as it was for them.
Yeah. And then we landed on the name. We looked at a lot of different names. I mean, we explored hundreds, it seemed like, and we landed on Current Meditation. What did you think of that when we first presented it to you?
Names are tough because you always are wondering, does this name, is this the best name for this? Does it make sense? Is it non-obvious where people won't understand what we're getting at here? We ultimately fell in love with that name because of we always were suckers for, the double meaning, and having a name that related to the natural flow of air or water, kind of that effortlessness, the way that the same word that you would use in positive psychology to say that you've dropped into a state of high, mental performance, the state of flow, and that being so much about what mental fitness helps you achieve is that effortless navigation of the world, just being, and also being so present that you are performing at your peak. We loved that. And we also loved, in a modern concept, that the word current means present day, now. This is the concept for now. This is what meditation looks like today. And it really was a great duality of kind of those two things coming together in a relatively simple name.
Might I offer up one more piece of that?
Of course.
To be current, to be here, to be right now, what's currently happening around you, which then ultimately led to the tagline of Current, the place to be.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah,
a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, very fun. And I do love how sometimes the simplest solutions are the most potent. The name like that seems so innocuous actually has such depth to it and meaning. So I've always been a sucker for that.
Yeah, Current, the place to be. So when you showed up in our office early 2016, we'll say, and we started working through this, had you done much story training before that, or what did you learn in the process?
Hadn't done any story training. I wish that was a part of curriculums, because I've heard you say this before, but I always get a kick out of it. Once you see the story inside of everything, it's hard not to see it. And it's a bit like the FedEx logo where you see the arrow between the E and the X, and then you can never unsee that. And one of the exercises I remember going through early on was to recognize the hero's journey and how well that mapped to the movie Star Wars, just as an example. And of course, pick any movie and you'll be able to map it. It is definitely an eye opener. I think that was the first thing. And now, fast forward, the incredibly simple ABT framework that you have, using that, it's so versatile in how you can use it. And everything comes down to relating an idea to somebody, some outcome that they might want, knowing who you're talking to, knowing what they want, knowing what challenges they may have, and how to overcome those challenges. That's really what I learned through learning about story, is just how well it maps to the way that the brain works and the way that the world works in terms of, what people are looking to do and accomplish. It's all story.
And how are you using it now? Number one, to first come up with the concept of epic managers, and I'll have you explain what that is, in a minute. And then how are you using story to launch and develop this brand?
So there's a theme here. We've been using story for startup companies in each case, and that to me was very helpful for the framing of it. Like I've mentioned, it came very naturally to us to think about epic managers before we even knew the name through the lens of story, because we had been living that story ourselves by owning franchises and being regional developers and speaking to franchisees and hearing their stories. And the theme of those stories was always the same. Most times it was, franchisees are excited to own a business. They want it to do really well. And they know that they need the operations to run well, but they have trouble figuring out how to do that. They don't necessarily know what levers to pull. And it's a little confusing. When you dig in, you realize the story is really, okay, great operators in franchise know that you need a great manager. That's really what it is. And that if you have a great manager, all of your worries, you're going to have high profit, high retention, and high sanity, because not having a great manager drives you nuts. But it's the challenge of finding those managers that really is difficult for franchisees. And how do you keep those managers? And they oftentimes would be in name any crazy scenario of, their stores not performing well. It always came back to who the leader was in the store, who the manager was in the location. So if they had better tools to figure out where to find great people and how to keep them, their 90% of the problems would go away. What's crazy about franchise is that it's very under-muscled when it comes to people and people systems. The franchisor can't get involved. There's co-employment. And so you have a fantastic business model that a franchisee buys. It's sold to them as being turnkey and hands-off, but it's not. The people side is tough. And at the end of the day, they need better solutions for how to handle that. So a lot of what we went through ourselves, because we had all those same challenges, and I could tell you some stories about, fails that we had. We had them all. It really came down to us figuring out, through a lot of hard work, steep learning curve, what's the right way to do this? What's the system? What's the framework? Just like the same you've done for building story in business context. And it was a long road with a lot of mistakes. Once we figured that out, our lives were dramatically simpler. The experience we had running our franchise locations changed in a significant way. Profit went up significantly. We had a 40% increase in our profit that we allocated just to the fact that we were getting better managers and they were staying with us longer, because we knew who was well suited to the role. And all of this story really is what led us to Epic Managers at the end of the day, because we've sold our stores a couple of years ago, but we wanted to bring this same expertise to other franchisees, because when you've gone through that pain of losing a manager and having to start over again, and it causing frustration and turnover in your team, and then you're paying money out of your bank account to make payroll because your store is sucking wind. That's really tough. It's the unglamorous side of franchise, and we, as much as possible, we want to help franchisees not experience that anymore. And it's a shame that this industry doesn't have more people that are trying to help in this way, creating companies that will help with the people side of things. There's a lot of DIY stuff. Oh, you can get a fancy ATS, or you can do sorts of recruitment marketing and things like that. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, do you have the expertise to spot good talent? And then do you know how to compensate them in a way that works for the business, it's profitable, but also that, the manager is happy, obviously, and it creates retention. Like the person wants to stay there. They feel rewarded in the work they're doing. So very long answer for you, Park, but
But what I want to hear, because you said
Yeah.
you've got several horror stories, what was like one of your worst manager stories that you experienced in any one of your franchises?
Well, there are many. I could tell you one that like I'm embarrassed about, which is just we've made all sorts of mistakes, Park. Let me just run through the catalog here. One of them. So we had stores. We're in Arizona. We're in Phoenix. We had stores in Westchester, New York.
And you're talking
And
Massage Envy now and
European Wax Center.
Okay.
So these were European wax centers, and we had a couple stores in Westchester, and we were struggling to hire out there. We couldn't find a manager, and so we had this super bright idea at Park. It was brilliant. We said, we're going to take a manager that we have in Arizona, and we're going to relocate them to Westchester. And we're thinking, all right, this is great because we've seen her operating here. This should work really well. We thought we had a good idea of this person's character and their potential and how well they could handle the job. So we go through this whole process of shipping them out there, basically. Like, they wanted to move. They said, oh, I'm excited. Let's move to New York. We basically helped to relocate them. Things are going well for the first week or two. Week 3, the communication becomes a little spotty. We're talking to our area manager and say, hey, have you heard from, insert name here? I don't want to put her on blast in case she ever listens to this. I doubt it. But just in case, I'm generous like that. Week 4, gone. Just completely ghosted us. Like, it was such a rookie mistake for us to have done that, but we didn't know. We were kind of just the blind leading the blind early on, and it was, let's do anything. We think we're being clever. Let's see if we can get this person relocated and do what big companies do, right? Move talent. And not a good idea, Park. Don't do that. It was rough, and all that happened because we were having such a hard time hiring locally. And had we had a better solution for that and knew how to find managers faster, we wouldn't have gone through all that pain and the embarrassment of spending, like, it was a lot of money, and when you lose a manager, it already costs you $100,000 in direct and indirect costs. I remember seeing in your book, Brand Bewitchery, that you had the Josh Burson list of all the hidden costs of losing key team members. And that's what happens in franchise. And franchisees don't realize that. So like all of these hidden costs that they have, they don't see it show up on one line item in the P&L. They don't realize how important it is to get that manager hire right. So that story for us, like, I have several, sets of scar tissue from things like that. And just the embarrassment of like, I just wish we knew how to find better managers, and the frustration of not knowing how to do it at the time. You feel a little helpless. So I don't want other people to feel that way, Park. I think it's worth, helping people, especially in this world of franchise where You have enthusiastic new business owners, and they just want to do it right, but they don't necessarily have all the tools.
Yeah. So to paraphrase an ABT that you used a little bit earlier, which was beautiful, by the way, I don't even know if you realized you used it. It's now ingrained in you. If you're speaking to a customer out there, your customer out there is saying, look, you have invested in a very promising and proven franchise opportunity, and you're ready to make hay in your market, but you can't find a quality manager to help you drive the whole business. Therefore, Epic Manager does what?
We recruit top talent managers for franchise businesses. It's as simple as that. And in that, we went from current meditation, where it was a complex thing. We were trying to bring something new to the market. Nobody's seen it before. Nobody's experienced it. Well, everybody's hired a manager. Everybody has had a manager quit on them. You talk about fight or flight, you getting an email that has resignation in the subject line, that's still like one of my biggest fears. It's like that I'll open my email and see that. It is a gut punch. And yeah, this service is a simple one, because it's just something that hasn't been brought to this world for franchisees. And when they're sold a business as turnkey, sure, it's beautiful systems, but it doesn't have the people piece to the level that they really need it, especially when you're new to it. And so you need new tools. You need a way to get past that. And if you're in a franchise that can be very profitable, the silliest thing you can do is not invest in the leadership. If there's a company that does it, like Epic Managers, I wish that existed, and that's why we created it. If that had existed, I would never have flown that manager out to New York and lost tens of thousands of dollars from doing it. And it is painful. It's something. So absolutely, that ABT, that simple ABT, is really at the heart of why we're doing this.
And you train them as well. So you go out and you recruit them, bring them in, and do a certain amount of training. When you get the manager into the franchisee, do you continue to work with them a little bit and do kind of an off-ramping into their system?
So we're kind of in phase one here. We are squarely focused on the finding great managers and providing some guidance around that process, because there's a lot that happens, as you know. First impressions, super important. So much about the way that somebody comes into a company is what they believe their experience will be. The recruiting process needs to be a reflection of a professional organization that's buttoned up. That's how you get the best talent, among many other factors. Of course, you got to know who you're looking for, how to find that person, how to assess their potential. That's all a part of what we do. But it also comes down to compensation. That's early on. And so we have resources to educate franchisees on how do you compensate the right way that benefits the manager and your business. Basically can pay for itself. Paying more money to a manager gives you access to better talent, but there's a way to structure it where it pays for itself entirely. So we talk about that. We come from, in our DNA, doing a lot of training for managers, and our aspiration is that we will then have follow-on to train managers more deeply. And so you're right on in that. That's part of what we are doing here at Epic Managers. The story is that the manager, to us, is one of the primary heroes of the story. I mean, these are tough jobs. These are individuals that are working with frontline teams. You're trying to deliver a polished experience with an hourly team member that you're managing. And there's another stat out there. Most managers get their first manager job at 30. They get their first manager training at 42. And so
that's nuts.
Even worse in franchise, I promise you, because of that co-employment, because of the can't touch it with a 10-foot pole, it's left to the franchisees. And in fairness to them, you've got a business to run. There's so many things for you to get your arms around. You can't provide that kind of guidance. And so we very much do see rounding this out with we both help you find an amazing manager as well as give you the tools to keep them by giving them great tools and giving you great guidance on how to support them.
And in all of your story training and the deep dive we did with Current Meditation, how did it inform the naming of your new enterprise?
It definitely informed it. Shamelessly, just stole as much from the story playbook as we could. What we loved, well, first of all, Park, I have to say what we loved was we were able to get the URL. And as you know, that is just such a fantastic coup when you can do that, because every URL is taken. But we had a whole list. We had super managers and we had a whole list of different names that we thought were fun and interesting. And we were trying to get across in the story or in the name, the story that the manager is a hero here. These are tough jobs. Like we said at the beginning, where I got the appreciation for just working the phones at the front desk. Like, it is difficult to juggle all of these things and deliver a consistent experience. Epic managers to us represents elevating the manager to where they should be, which is they are the hero. They are keeping this business running and together and profitable. They are your last line of defense between you getting the phone calls directly from your team members when they call out or them getting the phone calls. And it's also about the story of those managers. Epic, we loved because it both is the common parlance for that's awesome, but now, the classic is the long form poetry with a hero at the center of it. That's to us, this manager. This is a story of how a manager can find a great opportunity and a franchisee can be matched with that great manager. They have the tools along the way. They're given the tools they need and the guidance to be that hero. And then they can go on to conquer, running that store, growing their career, becoming more capable as a leader. But it all starts in some small place, right? It's a lot of these young managers just need the first parts and pieces of how to be a manager, whereas so much training is about leadership and it's very general and it's here's how you communicate better. But they're facing on a daily basis somebody calling out, someone not wearing their uniform, how to balance a schedule. I'm running out of inventory. These are the basic things that a manager has to master. And so it's a journey of small steps along the way. That's why we felt Epic Managers was such a great name for this company.
Well, Ross, this has been an epic conversation, man. Thank you so much for coming here. epicmanagers.com. That's how people can learn more about you, I guess.
Yes, thank you. epicmanagers.com. We are ready to help franchisees find top talent managers.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, I got a tip of the hat to your dad, Jeff. He had me out at Forest Highlands for some golf over the summer. What an absolute beautiful course. They're just up the road from us. They're in the fancy part of town. We're down here in Munns Park, and I've heard that those that live up in Forest Highlands affectionately call us Drunks Park. So we've got that going for us. And I have not seen Bob in a while, so tell him hello for me. I know he's camping out with a large part of your family over in Coronado Island in San Diego. So
yeah, slumming it in Coronado.
Well, that franchise world has been very, very, very good to you all.
That's right.
And it was awesome working with you. Well, thanks so much for taking the time and being here, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Park.
Well, there you have it. Did you experience any design serendipity in the listening of this episode? Heck, you can benefit from your own design serendipity when you share this episode with someone else. You never know. They might say, "Oh man, thanks for sending that show over. It was perfect timing because I was just thinking about ... Anyways, thank you for listening to this edition of The Business of Story. The show is edited wonderfully by Caden Howell. Our music is exclusively composed by Darius Holbert. And of course, community development and marketing is by Marissa Hill. Please join us on New Year's Day when we kick off 2024 with brilliant brand designer and leadership coach Scott Waldron. He is going to share with us his new book, Unlocked, a 52-week guide for the intentional leader, where he reveals a unique system of personal transformation through small, intentional actions. Talking about a great way to kick off the new year, and I hope you're here with us. Until then, I've got a challenge for you. In 2024, start your synchronicity journal and watch for and be mindful of the design serendipity that is woven throughout your life. It just might blow your mind like it has mine. And until then, too, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Happy New Year, and thanks so much for listening.